Some debates will forever rage across the internet. Apple versus Android, PC versus console, Goku versus Superman, Escobar versus El Chapo. But when it comes to the Mexican crime world, one debate has raged for the last decade. Who is the strongest cartel? The Sinaloa Cartel? Or the Jalisco Cartel New Generation, better known as the CJNG? The first, the Sinaloa Cartel, is a legacy brand. More famous, longer lasting, better established, the Sinaloa Cartel was, for a long time, unquestionably Mexico's main criminal group. For a long time, it has controlled the lion's share of marijuana, heroin, meth, cocaine, and now fentanyl going to the United States. Its former leader, Joaquin Guzman Loera, better known as El Chapo, is unquestionably Mexico's most famous narco. But the old warhorse is aging. The Sinaloa Cartel is riven by internal conflict as El Chapo's sons, known as the Chapitos, fight for control against their father's old associate, Ismael Zambada Garcia, alias El Mayo. There's room at the top, and the CJNG is fighting very hard to claim it. Since bursting onto the scene in 2011, the Jalisco Cartel New Generation has been willing to take on all comers. From its home base of Jalisco to the Gulf of Mexico, from Tijuana to Cancun, the CJNG wastes no opportunity to turn a profit. Synthetic drugs, migrant smuggling, extorting avocado farmers, even timeshares fraud. The CJNG makes a fortune off all of them. Today, we are going to consider a number of different categories to determine which one can claim to be Mexico's strongest cartel. By the way, this is just the first in a series of videos dedicated to the CJNG to mark the publication of World of Crime's new book, The CJNG, A Quick Guide to Mexico's Deadliest Cartel, available on Amazon now. I'm Chris Dolby, and welcome to World of Crime. Now, let's set a couple of ground rules. For the purposes of this video, we will not be trying to guess how much money or how many members each group has. There are estimates like that out there, but we went through them and found them to be highly dubious or inaccurate. Instead, we're looking at a different set of measures. To start, the territory that each group controls. The Sinaloa Cartel and the CJNG both have a presence in almost every Mexican state. And that's not what we mean. Instead, we're looking at those parts of Mexico where each group rules with little to no competition. For the Sinaloa Cartel, that's an easier ask. Their base in Sinaloa is virtually untouchable, and has been since the days of Pedro Aviles in the 1960s. Successive generations of Sinaloa Cartel leadership, especially El Chapo and El Mayo, have cultivated deep social and economic ties to communities across the state, as well as binding political connections to state politicians, the judiciary, and law enforcement. This control extends to certain parts of neighboring states firmly under Sinaloan control, including parts of Baja California Sur, Durango, Sonora, and Chihuahua. Now, criminal flare-ups do happen, but less frequently in Sinaloa areas. Violent friction within the Sinaloa Cartel itself is another matter, which we will touch upon in a couple of minutes. The theory goes that when one criminal group rules an area, there is less need for them to drop bodies. The CJNG disagrees with this theory. Its home turf comprises the states of Jalisco, Colima, and Nayarit, and at least the first two are regularly among Mexico's most violent states. Part of this comes from the way the CJNG governs. Where the Sinaloa Cartel generally seeks a quieter, stabler environment in which to conduct its core business, the CJNG actively foments violence. Even in Jalisco, attacks and killings of political candidates and police are a constant. For the way it rules more peacefully over a larger area and has for a longer time, the Sinaloa Cartel wins here. This one is pretty one-sided. Since 2013, the CJNG has been connected to an unreal 81% of all cartel-related deaths in Mexico, according to the Uppsala Conflict Data Program. Now, the cartel did come up fighting. Its ancestor, the Mencho Cartel, was expelled from its home in Michoacan by the brutal Zetas in the 2000s and had to take shelter with the Sinaloa Cartel. Some of the Mencho survivors were deployed as the Mata Zetas, a squad of brutal killers who took the fight to the Zetas. Dozens of people, sometimes only tenuously connected to the Zetas, were killed at a time in gory massacres in 2010 and 2011. That spirit has never left the CJNG. The group has normalized actions that were once among the most excessive of the Mexican drug wars. Bodies hanging from bridges or left dismembered on public display, mass graves filled with corpses, even allegations of cannibalism for new recruits. The desire to fight has seen the CJNG take on all comers across Mexico. Its fight with the Sinaloa Cartel is the most high profile, and has usually followed the same pattern. The CJNG repeatedly muscles in on turf controlled by the Sinaloa Cartel, and violence soars as a consequence. This was the case in the northern city of Tijuana, the most important drug trafficking gateway to the US. This was the case in the central state of Zacatecas, now a crucial fentanyl production and distribution hub. And most recently, this was the case in Chiapas, a southern state where migrants and drugs cross from Guatemala and which has seen tens of thousands of people being displaced over the last 2 years. But the CJNG is facing more than just the Sinaloa Cartel. In Michoacán, the Carteles Unidos, Viagras, Cartel del Abuelo, and Familia Michoacana. In Tamaulipas, the Gulf Cartel and Northeast Cartel. In Veracruz, the old school Zetas and the Cartel Mafia Veracruzana. In Guanajuato, the Santa Rosa de Lima Cartel. In San Luis Potosí, the Alemanes. In Zacatecas, the Talibanes. Christ alive, let me take a sip of water. The problem with all of this is the CJNG rarely delivers a killing blow to its enemy groups. It has been bogged down against well-entrenched gangs and self-defense groups in Michoacán since 2015. It has not been able to oust the much smaller Santa Rosa de Lima cartel in Guanajuato for a conflict that has lasted longer than the Second World War. In contrast, the Sinaloa Cartel mostly has to worry about the CJNG. It does face other rivals, like the Caborca Cartel, which contests its control of drug trafficking routes in Sonora. But the Sinaloa Cartel is traditionally more cautious about when and where to pick a fight, and is more willing to maintain alliances. Instead, the Sinaloa Cartel has been more worried about infighting for the last few years. Since 2017 and El Chapo's final capture, the group has essentially been riven in two. El Chapo's former partner, El Mayo, has fought to retain control, but is being outmaneuvered by four of El Chapo's sons, known as the Chapitos. This feud led to several brutal clashes, especially between 2017 and 2021. Since then, an uneasy truce between El Mayo and the Chapitos may have been brokered, with each faction staying on their own territory in Sinaloa and beyond. Now, despite the CJNG's costly strategy, for its capacity to sustain numerous wars across Mexico and remain united, the CJNG wins on fighting ability. The CJNG and the Sinaloa Cartel are jointly responsible for the vast majority of drugs going to the US, whether it be fentanyl, meth, or cocaine. Exports of marijuana and heroin have fallen off dramatically, due to the legalization of the former and demand for the latter being replaced by fentanyl. The lethal opioid, which kills tens of thousands of Americans a year, has been a boon for both groups, netting them billions. But let us look at the way the CJNG has been able to consistently innovate in one area: extortion. The CJNG and the Zetas are linked in more ways than one. Besides inheriting the mantle of Mexico's most brutal group from the Zetas, the CJNG has also adopted a tactic of squeezing every drop of profit from the areas it controls. Now, virtually every criminal group in Mexico engages in drug trafficking, kidnapping, and extortion. But the CJNG has been methodical about exploring local opportunities and maximizing revenue from them. In Michoacán, the CJNG did not invent the systematic control of the profitable avocado industry feeding the US market, but it has largely taken it over. The CJNG understands what acreage and how many trees each avocado farmer has and levies a tax accordingly. Once harvest season comes, the group shakes down farmers again for a cut of their total production. Then, when the fruits are packaged for export, the cartel takes a slice of that, forcing packaging plants to pay for the amount of boxes produced or the number of trucks rolling out. In Cancun, Playa del Carmen and Puerto Vallarta, tourist hubs on Mexico's Caribbean and Pacific coasts, hotels and restaurants are forced to pay a protection tax, or to allow drug sales on their property. In Jalisco, the CJNG's home turf, the tequila industry has fallen under its control, with producers squeezed for every metaphorical drop. One tequila company owner said he had to pay the group about 200,000 Mexican pesos, or over $13,000 a month, for 2 years until eventually he closed shop. The cattle industry in Jalisco has similarly been taken over, with the CJNG having access to state-run databases telling it how many cattle each rancher owns. As of 2022, ranchers exporting cattle to the US were paying about half of their total profits to the group in extortion fees. What of the Sinaloa Cartel? The Chapitos have proven to be no slouches at economic diversification. In Sinaloa and other parts of Mexico, the fisheries industry, for example, has become a powerful earner for them, with their men regulating how much of each type of seafood is caught, where it can be sold, and at what price. The best catch, ranging from abalone and lobsters to geoduck clams, are kept back and sold to Chinese buyers. The group has also been actively involved in illegal mining and illegal logging, especially in northern states where it enjoys limited criminal rivalries. But the Sinaloa Cartel's biggest edge over its CJNG rivals comes in Mexico's most lucrative criminal market at the moment, fentanyl. In 2023, DEA Administrator Ann Milgram said the Sinaloa Cartel had never been more powerful nor made more money than under the Chapitos. This is heavily based on the Chapitos being responsible for the lion's share of fentanyl entering the US. Although both groups often use the same suppliers from China to obtain chemical precursors needed to make fentanyl, the Sinaloans appear to have been more active in diversifying that supply chain, finding chemicals in Germany, India, Turkey, and beyond, according to Inside Crime. So, the CJNG might be more diversified, but the Sinaloa Cartel probably makes more money from the most lucrative criminal economy, fentanyl. For economics, we call it a draw. We'll make this one quick. Neither the CJNG nor the Sinaloa Cartel have one standout, emblematic leader on the level of El Chapo to carry them into the future. The CJNG's head honcho, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, or Mencho, is Mexico's best-known kingpin right now. His name and photo are used constantly in CJNG messaging, on narco banners, or in videos. Troops publicly shout their loyalty to him. His voice allegedly keeps being heard in CJNG videos. But there's a big problem. Mencho hasn't been seen for years. Rumors of his death regularly abound, and have been persistent enough for at least one important CJNG ally, the Mezcales in Colima, to use Mencho's death as a reason to turn on the group. Even if he's still alive, Mencho is almost 60, apparently suffers from acute kidney disease, and stays within a small area of Jalisco and Colima. His successor is unclear. Authorities suspect that his stepson, Juan Carlos González Valencia, would be next, but several other contenders exist. Whether any of them could hope to continue Mencho's talismanic reputation within the CJNG rank and file is highly in doubt. On the other side, the Chapitos are young, motivated, and united, as well as carrying on their father's legacy. They are also rarely, if ever, seen in public, but Ivan Archibaldo, Joaquin, and Jesus Alfredo have cultivated a cult of personality on social media. Men under their command flaunt their status and wealth under the hashtag Chapiza. They are also clearly on the ascendancy within the Sinaloa Cartel. The problem is, they have a major target on their backs. One of the Chapitos, Ovidio, was captured for the second time in January 2023 and soon extradited to the United States. The others have bounties worth millions on their head. If more of them should fall, the fragmentation of the Sinaloa Cartel could accelerate. So again, the Chapitos give the Sinaloa Cartel the edge in terms of leadership, but both groups face severe risks due to vulnerabilities at the top. So, who wins? According to our analysis, the Sinaloa Cartel can claim to be stronger in terms of overall leadership and territorial control. The group is undergoing a complete overhaul since El Chapo fell. But should the Chapitos survive this turbulent phase, they will almost certainly cement themselves as Mexico's most influential criminal figures. On the other side, the CJNG has proved very resilient. Across all of its battles, all of its rivalries, all of the deaths that it has caused, the 4 letters of CJNG and the cry of Somos gente del Señor Mencho have echoed across Mexico. The CJNG is certainly present in more of Mexico than the Sinaloa Cartel, but for all this violence, it is not dominant in many of these places. As such, World of Crime states the Sinaloa Cartel, under the reign of the Chapitos, would continue to be stronger and more profitable for a few years yet. But do you agree or disagree? Let us know in the comments. And remember, our book to the Jalisco Cartel New Generation is available now on Amazon. Until next time, this was World of Crime.